Hi, I'm Theo, and these broadcasts are to support the blogs on nomorec.com's website as well as the online classes. In this episode, are the biblical texts wrong, or am I? Welcome back to the No More Seed broadcast. I want to do another episode or broadcast where we kind of just check out things from personal reflection. And I'm thinking of my journey again, as we talked about in the very first episode of this channel in the introduction, and how people view the Word of God. And I'm seeing that there's a dichotomy occurring, which is interesting. I attended a recent conference online, and it was brought up how people in the West tend to have these ideas that are dichotomous in the sense that you have to have an alternative. It's an either or approach to understanding anything in general. But when it comes to the Bible, it's an approach where positions are built and you either are with this position or you're against it. It's either this way or that way. And it was brought out that Asians typically think in a different way, more of a both and approach. And that's, was tied to what, many people thought of the way that the Hebrew scriptures are actually understood, the way the Hebrew Bible presents the worldview and its cosmology and its understanding of things. And largely, scholars like John Walton have brought out the fact that this more dichotomous view comes later on with the influence of the Persian influence of more of this dualistic and dualism of a good versus evil, or black and white, or where Asians are more, it's kind of a both and rather than trying to separate it out and put it at polar extremes. But that's what we have today across the world. People are moving into these polar extremes of one side versus the other. It's us versus them, and you have extreme positions on any issue that's either to the far left or to the far right or to the far top or the far bottom. So maybe it is a case where the world is pushing to extremes. We have the rich getting richer, as they always say, and the poor getting poorer. And what was once in the middle that had developed is starting to slip away. But there are so many people trying to vie for a better position and crawl out of where they're at. Even the rich are trying to do the same, and those following like sports, in a sense, you get this picture that in Major League Baseball in 2022, the season is up in arms and is delayed because the owners have worked their way to getting a position where they have outfoxed the players' union, in a sense, is what is being stated. And the owners want to continue holding their cards close to their vest and maintaining the position they are of getting more and more gains and trying to, keep the players at bay and not allowing them to enjoy as much of an increase in income that the owners have. At least that's the picture that's being painted from the outside. And so it's billionaires versus millionaires, and the question, remains and begs if one side is taking advantage of the other. And so how much globally, when sports is a part of the picture, how much do the rich owners, and how much do the rich players, and how much do the advertisers, and how much does everybody benefit? And the poor people are left out, even though they look to sport as a source of inspiration on the screens or the radios, and what they end up with, and that they can hope for. And with broadcasts now, rights being limited and people not able to experience that. How important is that in the global economy and in the global sense? And what does it mean for the poor people who do not get to see the football matches or experience the cricket or whatever form of sport that they prefer? And how much do these things get influenced in things like the Olympics and whatnot? Can our heroes today come forth, and is sports venues being taken advantage? It doesn't matter. Uh, do we really buy products based on what the rich sports people tell us to buy? How much is that affecting us either way? Getting back to our point that I'm trying to wrap my brain around is, again, we find ourselves in these extremes and we don't have compromise. And it's either my reading of the text is superior to yours or not. And either you're with me or you're against me. And this then begs the question where our loyalties lie: with the text, with tradition, with what tradition? Are we trying to actually understand what the message that was given is intended originally and apply that to our current situation? Or are we merely sticking with what we believe before and it holds sway over what the text intends to message? It's hard in 2022 post, as we're trying to get ourselves out of this pandemic that has been upon us since 2019's onset of the COVID-19 situation that led to the events of 2020 and 2021 and are still upon us in 2022. And how do we get to this point? We have those that are anti-vaxxers, we have those that are vaxxers, we have those that are pushing that you must get vaccinated. There are those who are pushing you must wear masks. There are those that are pushing you cannot push one's health. And smokers are finding it difficult to smoke in public places because when they smoke, other people smoke. But then, does that same principle apply to those who are vaccinated and unvaccinated? And can the unvaccinated, be held responsible for spreading the virus, in a sense, by not getting vaccinated? And the science behind it and the questions behind it and the questioning of science and the viewpoints that go into all these things. And so this is the world in which we have inherited. This is the world in which we live, and the Bible comes so much under fire on both sides. Those who are on the extreme end of the spectrum versus those on the other extreme. Those who say that you must read the Bible my way and it must be this way, to those who think the Bible is such an ancient text. It should have no bearing on us whatsoever. But yet, think about our history. Think about how much this text that we call the Bible has, in fact, or even the proposition of Yahweh as a supreme being one of the most paramount features of religion, in the top three religions in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam that affect the world that we have inherited, and how the past 2,000 years has been dominated in some sense or another with the globalization of things and the idea of the missionaries that have gone forth and the spread of things like Islam in the ways that they've spread. And so these things have, brought about that the fact that the principles behind our thinking that we've inherited have largely from the West become the background for which we believe in our philosophy and which we find our values. Whether or not those in the West today who hold to the text as being anything or not, the value system that we've inherited of which we view our world is definitely based largely upon what we inherited from those who came before us who did believe in the text in one sense or another. And the question that I have is I find those that are voraciously on either side of the argument, the debate, whether they are to the extreme one end that you have to read the Bible this way, to the point on the other end that the Bible is worthless. And I cannot find myself in either side. For those who discredit the Bible entirely and say, how can you worship, this Yahweh who's nothing more than another among all the other ancient Near Eastern gods? He's nothing more than just, a backwater god from this, small, nondescript, people. I mean, it's just, why is he so widely viewed when all the other ancient Near Eastern gods, did not get widely viewed? And it's amazing to me that we carry with us this Persian or even the Greco-Roman ideologies of these extremes where it has to be this way or that way, and we've lost this idea that comes from the ancient Near East, which is actually West Asia, so still Asian, of a both hand. We keep forcing upon the world this ideology from the West that it has to be either this way or that way. It's black or white. You're either with me or against me. And we've lost the ability to compromise. We've lost the ability to communicate, which is desperately needed, I think, globally, to communicate. Where could it be possible that your reading and my reading could align in some sense or another? Can we find common ground in certain areas in which we believe? And, wondering if Christianity itself can find common ground for those who believe, such as the Roman tradition or the Eastern Orthodox traditions that proceeded for many centuries, to what came about in the Protestant Reformation, to what came about 100 years ago when we went through the world faced the Spanish flu, 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and all they went through. And you had traditions coming out of that, like the Pentecostal movement that led to the charismatic movement in the 60s, that even went through Roman Catholic traditions. It found some favor there. These traditions that came about, and this conservative fundamentalism that came about a century ago, and Zionism that came about, where we somehow have attached to God this idea that he's addicted to or attached to a piece of geography even today, and that geography must go to those who claim to follow him, and we leave no room for folks like the Palestinians or the Palestinian Christians. We don't even consider their voices. They cannot have a voice because our reading is superior. And on the other extreme, we have those that would discredit any future use of Israel, that God is finished with them and there is nothing. And so that falls back to what we talk about in our other videos where we focus on cessationism, or the idea that preterism, that there's nothing more. And so God is finished with Israel. The church has entirely replaced Israel, and we find ourselves caught in between this idea that it's either anti-Semitic or entirely, or it's to the other extreme where it's anti-Palestinian. And I think that there should be some discourse to allow for some approach in the middle. I don't wish to be anti-Semitic. I don't wish to be anti-Palestinian either. I don't want it to be an either or. I have to be on either side. And if I speak for Palestinians, I'm anti-Semitic. If I speak for Zionism, I'm anti-Palestinian, and there's no room for both and we fear this idea that it's either or, otherwise we risk being syncretistic in some sense, and we cannot allow for expressions and understandings that would be in the middle and allow for both voices to resonate on either extreme, and for the bus to be able to, instead of falling in one side of the ditch or the other, the bus to actually get down the middle of the road and we make some sort of progress, allowing a compromise that affords what is best for both sides. Rather, we want to exclude one side so that we find the view that we hold to be supreme to the exclusion of the others and conquer their view and destroy it and bring it to nothing. We certainly hope you're enjoying this discussion and wish to return for part 2, where we continue this great thought process of understanding better ways of seeing things rather than the logical fallacy of a false dichotomy that is often put into play when thinking about various readings and interpretations of our text, which is reflexive overall of our tradition within our thought systems. Come back for part 2 and learn more. Thank you very much, and God bless you for listening. Stay tuned for more episodes in videos to help you with your journey from nomoresee.com.